Hello, Sam.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Oh, not too terribly bad. Hey, if the Browns can go get Malik Willis, should they get Malik Willis?
I think Malik Willis is the most fascinating quarterback kind of this offseason cycle. He's a real X factor in this whole thing because he's looked fantastic since he got to Green Bay, and he'd been a disaster in Tennessee. I mean, he looked completely non-viable. He didn't look like he had any place in the NFL when we saw him early in his career. And then the Packers went and got him. Matt LaFleur worked his magic on him. And from that moment on, he's looked legitimately like he could be a decent starter going forward. And I have no idea what his contract would look like. I have no idea how much money he's going to get this offseason. But if I was a team in a tricky quarterback situation or, without an obvious pathway to Fernando Mendoza at number one overall, and I was looking for an answer at the position, Malik Willis is the guy I'd be interested in trying.
Well, obviously the Browns quarterback room right now is Shedeur Sanders, Deshaun Watson, Dylan Gabriel. And a lot of people have been advocating, hey, it was really bad statistically for Shedeur, but what's the harm in running it back with him as a starting quarterback making so little money as a fifth-round pick? How viable an option do you think that is? Because that's the easiest route to just do it, but it could also be really hard if you hire a 30-year-old head coach and Shedeur plays anything like he played last year, then that compromises a lot of what your plan is.
Yeah, I think it depends on the team's, appetite for that kind of season. I mean, you're right, it's easy to do. You just install Shedeur Sanders as the starter, you accept that next year is going to be really rough, and you plan for the following year's draft, which is supposed to be, significantly better at the quarterback position. Now, the caveat is that often looks the way a year out from the draft, and a lot can change in 12 months, and maybe you get to next year's draft, and it isn't as good as we thought it was going to be. So there's always a risk in doing that. But, yeah, it would be very easy, but teams don't tend to like, going into a season knowing it's going to be a disaster and it playing out that way. You could argue that's what the Browns did this year. I mean, they went in with Joe Flacco as the starter. That was never likely to last more than a few games. And then they were going to turn it over to the two rookies. And that's exactly what happened. The season went about as well as you would have expected. And that ended up getting Stefanski run out of the building. And here we are. So, they could do that, but I don't think that they're going to be particularly keen on having that kind of sacrificial season.
Yeah, you're right about that. So how would you do it if you were the Browns with this quarterback situation, 2026? Because it's like, Sam, it's not a good QB room. I'm not saying it's a good QB room, and I don't know if Shedeur Sanders is the future, and I feel very strongly that Deshaun Watson and Dylan Gabriel aren't. But I'm like, man, we've already made one crazy decision to bring in a guy, and it's backfired. I don't want to double down or even come close to any of that stuff. I kind of want to start fresh with somebody else if we're going to do it.
Yeah, look, I mean, the first thing I would do is they have multiple first-round picks this year. They set themselves up for this year. I would at least be calling up the Raiders and finding out if they're open to moving out of that number one overall pick. That's why you have that extra ammunition. You've got the kind of trade collateral that you could make a move like that if you wanted to do it. But obviously it depends. The Raiders might be dead set on Fernando Mendoza and want no part of moving out of that pick, and it's just not on the table. But if it is, I think it's absolutely a thing that you should consider, jumping up to number one overall to make that trade. If it's not an option at all, then, yeah, look, I think Malik Willis is a really intriguing option because he's the guy that has shown, albeit in a really small sample size, like high-end ability. He's got an incredible arm. He's got elite athleticism. And the thing that changed in Green Bay is he showed he can process. He can work through progression. He can deliver the ball accurately, not necessarily just to one read and run. So, that contract would be an interesting one to get done. If I'm Malik Willis's agent, the absolute minimum you're looking for is the Justin Fields contract with the Jets, and probably more than that, but that's doable.
You mentioned, and we're talking to Sam Monson right now on the hotline, you mentioned Mendoza, and I saw a lot of mixed reviews from last night. You know how this works. A lot of casuals come in, just watch one game, and then that's the end of that quarterback if he's not putting up 400 yards and running all over the place. So what did you think? What's the honest evaluation of what you saw last night?
Yeah, I don't think last night was his best game by any stretch, but even in that circumstances, he made a couple of really big plays in the game. A couple of huge third downs. The run, obviously, that ended up being the go-ahead touchdown, where he, powered his way through some guys, launched himself at the goal line. So, yeah, I don't think that was his best performance, but even within that, I think he still showed pretty impressive skills. He's accurate. He's a good processor. He's more athletic than people are going to give him credit for. Maybe he wouldn't be the number one quarterback in some draft classes, but I think he's by far the number one quarterback in this draft class. And, that's the critical element.
Why are quarterbacks struggling so much recently?
I'm not sure. I think we see this go in cycles. It's a difficult thing to do at any point in the NFL for these guys to come in, hit the ground running. And some guys are able to do it. Some guys just get it from day one. But it's a difficult jump. These NFL offenses are not simple. Defenses are fighting back. We're seeing the complexity and the difficulty that you have to deal with the kind of level of disguise that defenses are using right now, the post-snap rotation. It's a difficult ask, and it's going to take some time for a lot of young quarterbacks.
All right, you're mentioning those young quarterbacks. The way the NFL looks, I try to start out the week yesterday, and this is normally not my role on the show, but I came on yesterday, and I'm like, maybe the Browns aren't as far away because I thought their defense was just as good as the defenses I saw over the last few weeks in the NFL playoffs. And you only need like 3 drives in some of these games to be able to win. What is it right now about the state of affairs in the NFL that these defenses all are just, especially the defensive lines, are just crushing up front these offensive lines? Has something materially changed in the NFL?
Yeah, I think the last few years, defenses have been fighting back and have been in the ascendancy and kind of growing in the level of the balance of power versus offenses. You're seeing that nothing is necessarily revolutionary new. We haven't discovered any kind of dramatic defense that just completely changed the whole balance of power. But I think collectively defensive coaches are getting better at blending, these disguise looks on the back end with everything they're doing up front, sort of simulated pressures, which are effectively just repackaged old school zone blitz type stuff. But they're just getting much more sophisticated with blending it all together, making it difficult to diagnose pre-snap for offenses, and just sort of forcing quarterbacks and offensive coaches to be on the defensive. Defenses used to be reactive and reacting and changing to everything that the offense was showing them. And the real shift in the last few years is they've fought back and decided, no, we're going to go on the attack. We're going to show them different things and force the offense to react, not vice versa.
Sam Monson joining us, co-host of the Check the Mic pod with Steve Palazzolo. All right, have you been asked about Ty Simpson much?
No.
What would you think of him? Because I have an aversion to him, and I'm going, oh, God, we have 2 first-round picks. And if he were to come out, obviously, like that's something that people would want. Yeah,
it's not that he can't be good, but it's a really, really rough list of guys that have come into the league with that level of inexperience. It's a particularly curious decision for him, given the landscape in the college world at the moment. It's skewing in the opposite direction. We're going to see more and more guys coming into the league with crazy amounts of experience because the incentive is to stay in college now. It's, get paid, take the NIL money, transfer to a different school, a better school in a lot of instances. Obviously, he's unlikely to do that at Alabama, but you're going to see more and more of these guys come into the league with Bo Nix, Dylan Gabriel levels of experience rather than, these single or double digit, 15 starts under his belt the way Ty Simpson is going to come into the league. So it's not that he can't be successful, but it is just a crazy small list of guys that have had that level of inexperience and been good. And the NFL has never been less equipped to develop these guys. It's not a place to try and learn unless you find a team like the Green Bay Packers, who have done it multiple times now in their sort of succession plan of drafting a quarterback, sitting him for multiple years behind an established starter, and doing it that way. I think it's a very risky thing for Ty Simpson to come into the NFL now.
So I saw you on social media yesterday. I can't imagine you think that highly of this guy's old boss, but let me ask you about this guy, Sean McDermott. Is that a guy that the Browns should be rushing out to go try to bring in?
Yeah, I think Sean McDermott should be, one of the most attractive head coaching candidates this offseason. I mean, nobody looked at the Bills this year, or most years, and said this is a coaching failure. Like, this is a team that is not getting it done at the critical time because of their coaching failures. McDermott's record pretty much speaks for itself in terms of, win rate, perennial success with this team. I think the issues that they've got in Buffalo, and there aren't many of them. I mean, it's been a good team every single year. The issues that they've got are more personnel than they are coaching driven. The only caveat would be, I think Buffalo is trying to put out the message now that McDermott had more of a say in terms of personnel than people thought he did, and so that's why he's been on the chopping block rather than Brandon Beane, the GM. I don't know if that's true or not, or if that's just the spin that's being put out there now. But in terms of just a coach, yeah, I think absolutely McDermott should be one of the first guys on the list if you're looking for a head coach right now.
There seems to be this fascination. People are enamored with clips online when they see some of these young, upstart potential head coaches talk football. And what I laugh about is anybody who's actually covered the league knows there's hundreds of guys that can do that. Yet fans get excited because these guys haven't failed yet. They haven't failed as necessarily calling plays. Like Grant Udinski seems to be right now in the pole position for the Browns head coaching job, and his first coaching job ever was in 2019, and he's never called plays. How do you differentiate with candidates who's really good at talking and who's really good at actually leading and being able to kind of command that respect when coaching a football team?
Yeah, that's the funny thing about this every year is, we get asked all the time, like, who's a good candidate, who's a good head coach? Nobody knows. Like, nobody. Even the teams hiring them. It's, for number one, you don't get to see most of the important parts of being a head coach. So from the outside, it's basically impossible to know who's a good head coach without seeing them do it. And then number two, the head coaching job is so many different things. And, the X's and O's part of it, as you said, it's a pretty small part of the job. You've got to lead an entire team full of people. You've got to delegate to people. You've got to be able to hire, competent assistants, and that's a big part of it as well. The whole thing is extremely difficult to put together. It's sort of several jobs all rolled into one, most of which you don't really get to see from the outside. So, yeah, obviously you want the guy to be a smart football mind and someone that you have confidence in, knowing what he's doing and, having a good scheme at the basis or as the foundation of everything he's doing. But whether or not he's going to be a good head coach is 15 other things that you're going to try and get to the bottom of in the day-long interview that these guys are having in a lot of these programs. So I think that's the big thing is that's why these interviews are so important. It's why they take such a long time. You're trying to get to everything you can possibly think of in terms of how is he going to handle this situation? What is your plan for this? And from the outside, it's all guesswork.
Sam Monson joining us on the show. I got a couple more for you. One, how attractive is the Browns job compared to the others?
I think it's reasonably attractive. I think generally Andrew Berry is seen in pretty high standing throughout the NFL. It's always tough from the outside because, we don't know really who the driving force behind the Deshaun Watson thing was, right? If that was ownership, then I think you give Andrew Berry an awful lot of leeway to say, look, most of what he's done has been very good, and they've been absolutely hamstrung by, I think, literally the worst single personnel move that's ever been made in the history of the NFL, the Deshaun Watson deal, when all is said and done. So if that wasn't him sort of forcing that or driving that, then you say, look, this is a good GM that's built this thing into a good situation multiple times already. And even if we've got some work to do, on the offensive line, some other areas, Andrew Berry's able to put this thing back together and all will be good. If Berry was the guy driving the Deshaun Watson thing, then it's a different conversation. And you're like, okay, sure, most of what he does is good. On the other hand, he's also made the worst mistake anybody's ever made. So that's a little bit more tricky. Obviously, it also comes down to what you read on the ownership is like, how trigger happy do we think that Haslam is going to be? Am I comfortable with the kind of runway I'm going to get to try and turn this thing around? But look, overall, I think there's some good pieces there. As soon as they get out from the Deshaun Watson contract, I think they'll have a lot of flexibility to build this thing in the right way. And then, I think generally it's a pretty solid job.
All right, finally from me, how well do you think Kevin Stefanski will do it in Atlanta?
It depends what he's able to make of Michael Penix. The Falcons, the previous staff that the Falcons had loved Michael Penix Jr. I don't know that other people do. In fact, most people, I think, did not. Certainly not to the degree that they did. So it really comes down to whether Stefanski, number one, what does he think about Michael Penix Jr., and B, what is he able to get out of him? Because if Michael Penix Jr. is not the guy and they have to start over, then this team doesn't have a quarterback, then all bets are off. We've already seen, Cleveland is a good example, but there's plenty of others as well, how hard it is to be good if you don't have a quarterback or if you're trying to find one year on year on year. That colors everything. That changes what the head coach is able to do at all. So I think there's a lot of pieces there in Atlanta. I think the defense is in good shape, and I think they're smart to keep Jeff Ulbrich around if that's the route they're going to go. The offense is going to depend on the quarterback situation, whether they have one or whether they're looking.
If you were the Browns, would you trade for Michael Penix Jr.?
No, absolutely not right now, based off what we've seen. Look, he's got an arm, but he's injured, and there were major question marks before that.
Okay, I had to ask. All right, Sam Monson, follow him on Twitter at Sam Monson NFL, co-host of the Check the Mic pod with him and Steve Palazzolo. Sam, thank you very much for the time, friend.
Anytime, guys. Take it easy.
You as well, Sam Monson, joining us on the Make It Right, Call Kyle Right hotline. So that's a notice to Michael Penix. Are we going to fight about Michael Penix later?
Two very different answers compared to Malik Willis.